Y'all, I gotta let y'all know. I don't know if I can defend K-Ci and JoJo. You guys have to hear this video. They are telling a horror story about them, and the part that I just can't deal with. When they were performing, did you know they had minors on the stage with them? It's giving R. Kelly all over again. They had young minors on the stage, and the music and the lyrics that was pushing, it was, inappropriate in nature. It was sexual immortality, And I'm surprised because it was raised in a Christian household. In their household, as this video you're going to see, their parents did not allow them to listen to worldly, secular music. They raised them to be, Christians. So, how did they stray away from that and to get involved with drugs and all this stuff like that? Well, honey, you guys got to check this out because it's some stuff in there. I'm like, whoa, I had no idea. Glory to God. So make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe here. And I just want to say thank you all for liking, sharing, and subscribing to this YouTube channel. I appreciate you. Now let's see what's going on.
You're gonna marry Mary J. Blige, aren't you? That's a rumor for the state school, K-Ci is not getting married.
So we like, you know what? We just gonna come out and let y'all know the mistakes that we made.
After everything that has finally come out about K-Ci and JoJo, defending them is no longer something most fans are willing to do. From the gospel-trained brothers who became the lead voices of one of the biggest R&B groups of the 1990s before everything started falling apart.
They would call me the Michael Jackson of gospel.
To the assault charges, the onstage scandal in front of a crowd full of minors, and the years of addiction that quietly destroyed their voices.
What I see in your blood work that your liver is not that healthy anymore.
But the full story of what the Haley brothers have actually done behind the music is the part most fans never wanted to face. So let's get into it. Cedric Haley was born on September 2nd, 1969, in Charlotte, North Carolina. His younger brother Joel arrived on June 10th, 1971. The family settled in nearby Monroe, and from the very beginning, music was not optional in the Haley household. Their parents, Anita and Cliff, were both gospel singers, and the only stations allowed on the radio in their home were the ones playing the kind of music their parents performed.
My mom had a group. My dad had a group. JoJo would be around the house singing all the time.
Cedric and Joel learned to harmonize before they learned most things, and the church became their first stage. The boys grew up steeped in the kind of Pentecostal and holiness traditions, where sacred music was treated as theology, and the discipline of those services shaped the way they used their voices for the rest of their lives. For a stretch in their childhood, the family relocated to Baltimore and continued performing gospel music there. Eventually, they returned to Charlotte. By the time Cedric was old enough to attend Garinger High School, he and Joel were already part of a family gospel group that included their father, an 8-member ensemble called Little Cedric and the Haley Singers. They began recording in 1983 with the album I'm All Right Now on Atlanta International Records. And although that debut did not chart, the next two records, Jesus Saves and God's Blessing, both placed on the Billboard Gospel chart. The voices were already there. Cedric had a tenor that could do almost anything, and Joel could match him on harmonies that older singers struggled to land. Cedric earned a nickname inside the gospel community at the time. People called him the Michael Jackson of gospel, partly because of his stage presence and partly because of the way he could pull at a song until the room was crying. Their cousins were already in the music industry too. Fantasia Barrino and Dave Hollister were both family, and so was Stephanie Mills. Through a mutual female acquaintance, the brothers eventually met another set of siblings who were doing something similar. Donald and Dalvin DeGrate were the sons of Reverend Donald DeGrate, a televangelist who had once worked as a talent coordinator for the 700 Club. The four boys, all gospel-raised, decided around 1989 that they wanted to pivot into secular R&B. Their parents would not approve. The industry would not promise anything, and Cedric Joel, Donald, and Dalvin packed up everything anyway and pointed themselves at New York. The four young men drove to New York with a 29-song demo tape and no appointment at any label. They used a phone book to find the address of Uptown Records and walked into the building cold, hoping to land an audition with founder Andre Harrell. They did not have anyone vouching for them. They did not have a manager. What they had was the demo and the willingness to perform a cappella in a hallway if they had to. Heavy D overheard the tape and pushed for them to be heard properly. Harrell ended up giving them a live audition, and after they sang "Come and Talk to Me" and "I'm Still Waiting in the Office," he offered them a deal on the spot.
And then Devontae was like, "Hey man, why don't we just put our name together, man?"
They took the name Jodeci, an abbreviation built from JoJo, Devontae, and K-Ci, with Dalvin's name not making the final word. Their debut album, Forever My Lady, arrived in 1991, and it changed the entire sound of mainstream R&B almost the moment radio got hold of it. The record sent 3 straight singles to #1 on the R&B chart: Forever My Lady, Stay, Come and Talk to Me. The album sold platinum, and Jodeci stepped into the lane that would eventually earn them the nickname the Bad Boys of R&B. The sound was rougher than what radio was used to. The image was harder. They wore Timberlands and leather and were photographed looking like men who had grown up in a city that never quite trusted them, even though they had grown up in church. Ebony magazine eventually started calling them the Kings of Doomy R&B, a label the brothers themselves never embraced, but never managed to escape. Diary of a Mad Band followed in 1993, with hits like Cry for You and Feenin'. The Show, The After Party, The Hotel arrived in 1995 and gave them Freakin' You, Love You for Life, and Get On Up. All 3 albums went multi-platinum. By their mid-20s, K-Ci and JoJo were 2 of the most recognized voices in the genre. K-Ci started dating Mary J. Blige around the same time, a relationship that would become one of the most damaging chapters of his personal life. Mary would later describe their decade-long entanglement as dark and abusive in her 2021 documentary, and the public humiliation she suffered when K-Ci denied their engagement on television became one of the defining moments of her early career.
K-Ci is not getting married.
Behind the scenes, the group that radio loved was not as unified as the record suggested. Devontae Swing produced and controlled almost everything, and his style was demanding to the point of suffocating. As Jodeci moved through their 3 albums, K-Ci and JoJo gradually became the primary vocal focus, and the resentment that built up around that shift quietly poisoned the chemistry in the studio. The Haley brothers were the voices on radio. Devontae was the architect of the sound. Neither side was fully willing to share credit with the other in a way that felt fair. Money made everything worse. The contracts the group had signed at Uptown reflected the moment they had been desperate kids willing to take any deal that walked through the door. The contracts did not reflect the commercial success that followed, and disputes over royalties became a constant background noise. Andre Harrell's eventual replacement by Sean Combs at Uptown only added another layer of tension, and the Haley brothers in particular felt the financial squeeze of a structure they had outgrown years earlier. When K-Ci and JoJo eventually broke out as a duo, those royalty fights would explode into outright lawsuits over how the money was being distributed. In 1993, K-Ci and JoJo became entangled in a serious legal incident in a hotel room. K-Ci was charged with self-exposure, and JoJo was charged with SA. The case ended in a settlement and probation. It was one of the first public signs that the lifestyle around Jodeci was producing the kind of consequences the music could not paper over, and it set a pattern of legal trouble that would follow both brothers for decades. In 1995, Devontae Swing was the victim of a violent home invasion and assault that traumatized him and reshaped the entire dynamic of the group. The legal paranoia and personal damage that followed did not heal cleanly. By 1996, with promotion for the show, The After Party, the hotel slowing down, K-Ci and JoJo decided to step away from the group and record together as a duo. They called it temporary. The DeGrate brothers experienced it as something closer to abandonment. The split sent K-Ci and JoJo into one of the most successful runs of their career, and it sent Jodeci itself into a hiatus that would last almost 2 decades. The brotherhood the four of them had built in the back of a car driving to New York was over for the foreseeable future. K-Ci had already been quietly building a solo profile before the official duo formed. In 1994, he covered Bobby Womack's If You Think You're Lonely Now for the soundtrack to the film Jason's Lyric.
If you think you're lonely now.
The song peaked at number 17 on the Billboard Hot 100 and proved that his voice alone could carry a record. In 1996, K-Ci and JoJo together provided the hook for Tupac Shakur's How Do You Want It, which went to number 1 on the Hot 100 and gave them their first chart-topping moment as a vocal pair. According to the brothers, Tupac had originally tried to sing the hook himself in his signature, thugged-out delivery, and when it was not working, he asked them to take it. They did it their way and ended up turning the song into a number 1 record. The day before Tupac was shot in Las Vegas, the three of them had been together filming the video for Toss It Up. Tupac had asked K-Ci to come to Vegas with him on the trip that would end his life. K-Ci did not go. Their debut album as a duo, Love Always, dropped on June 17, 1997. The first 2 singles, You Bring Me Up and Last Night's Letter, performed respectably on the R&B chart. Then came All My Life. JoJo had written the song for his daughter, Kayla Tiffany. It was lush, restrained, and spiritually rooted in the gospel they had grown up singing, and it became one of the biggest ballads of the entire decade. All My Life held the number 1 spot on the Billboard Hot 100 for 3 straight weeks. Love Always sold 4 million copies. Jodeci's reunion was indefinitely tabled because there was no commercial reason to interrupt what K-Ci and JoJo were doing without their former bandmates. The duo had effectively eclipsed the group that had launched them. They also briefly joined Babyface and his After 7 brothers in a one-off supergroup called Milestone for the Soul Food soundtrack. It's Real followed in 1999, with Tell Me It's Real climbing to number 2 on the Hot 100 and going platinum within 6 weeks. In 2000, they released X, named for the Roman numeral marking 10 years in the industry. Crazy. Included on the Save the Last Dance soundtrack, peaked at number 11, and put them right back on radio rotation as the new decade began. From the outside, K-Ci and JoJo had quietly become one of the most reliable hit-making duos in R&B. Inside, the warning signs were already there. In December 2000, K-Ci performed at the KIISFM Jingle Ball in Los Angeles. The audience that night included a significant number of minors. During his set, he allegedly exposed himself on stage, and the response was immediate and devastating. Within weeks, he was charged with 23 counts of indecent exposure and 1 count of lewd conduct. He vehemently denied the allegations from the beginning. Several months later, K-Ci pleaded no contest to the charges. He received a suspended sentence, 3 years of probation, was ordered to pay close to $1,000 in penalties, and was required to perform community service. The legal consequence was relatively mild. The career consequence was not. The Jingle Ball incident detonated the brand the duo had spent the previous 3 years building. All My Life had positioned them as wedding song royalty, the kind of artists parents and grandparents could enjoy alongside teenagers. That image evaporated overnight. Radio stations began quietly distancing themselves from the duo. Programmers who had played All My Life in heavy rotation now had to weigh whether playing K-Ci's voice on family-friendly stations was worth the risk. The momentum that had carried Love Always, It's Real, and X stopped almost instantly. Their 4th album, Emotional, was released in November 2002. and failed to chart anywhere close to where the previous three had landed. The singles This Very Moment and the Rodney Jerkins produced It's Me did not connect. The label support that had backed every previous release thinned out, and the duo found themselves working harder for less return. In 2003, both K-Ci and JoJo were arrested on tax evasion charges related to live performances they had done between 1999 and 2001. Their lawyer argued that as artists, neither one of them handled their own financial affairs, and that a change of accountants had likely caused the missed payments. The legal cloud added to the public sense that something had gone seriously wrong inside their operation. K-Ci released a solo album called My Book in late 2006, but it failed to break through the way fans had hoped. By the middle of the decade, the addiction problems both brothers had been managing privately were beginning to show on stage. They missed dates. They arrived late. They sang inconsistently. The voice that had carried All My Life across the world was starting to sound rougher, and the duo was no longer the safe booking it had once been. Promoters started passing on them. Radio stopped playing the back catalog at the same volume it once had. By 2008, the situation had become impossible to hide. JoJo suffered a severe seizure inside a recording studio that year, and doctors connected the medical episode directly to years of heavy alcohol use. It was the first time the brothers acknowledged their substance abuse issues publicly, and the acknowledgement forced everything else into the open. Reports also began circulating that the duo was facing serious financial hardship, despite the catalog they had built.
It was like we got tired of hearing all the rumors, reading all the rumors.
Their international shows started getting brutal reviews. A 2010 run of performances in Australia drew open criticism from fans who said the brothers had appeared intoxicated and had been unable to deliver their own hits. Refunds were demanded. Reviews used words like shambolic. A Wembley Arena show in 2011 drew similar coverage, with the duo arriving late and performing poorly. Promoters who had once chased them stopped returning calls. In 2010, the brothers agreed to do something most artists in their position would have refused. They allowed cameras inside their recovery process. The TV One reality docuseries, K-Ci and JoJo Come Clean, documented their attempts to achieve sobriety and rebuild their relationship as brothers. The show was harder to watch than anyone expected. A medical professional informed them on camera that their lifestyle had caused permanent damage to their internal organs and to their vocal cords. The voices that had built their entire career had been physically altered by the years of drinking. The damage was not theoretical. It was visible on the scans.
What I see in your blood work that your liver is not that healthy anymore.
The series only ran for one season, but it served as a public reckoning. Some viewers respected the honesty. Others were unsettled by how openly the show admitted that the brothers had been struggling for far longer than anyone outside their immediate circle had understood. The years of codependency between them had also created a particular kind of cycle. Whenever one of them was trying to get sober, the other one was usually still drinking, which made simultaneous recovery almost impossible. In 2013, K-Ci and JoJo released their fifth duo album, My Brother's Keeper, with a fresh deal at Babyface's Soda Pop Records, distributed through E1. The release did not return them to commercial relevance, but it confirmed that the music was still in them. JoJo went to rehab 3 times across this period. By 2020, he was publicly stating that he had been sober for an extended stretch. K-Ci would later reveal that he had survived an unspecified illness that year that he and his doctors had not expected him to live through. The Jodeci reunion fans had been waiting on for almost 20 years finally happened in 2014, when the 4 original members performed together at the Soul Train Awards. They lip-synced through several of their classics, and the performance drew a mixed reception. Some fans cried at the sight of all 4 men back on the same stage. Others were quick to point out the vocal strain visible in K-Ci and JoJo's contributions. The brothers had survived, but their voices had paid for the survival. The full Jodeci reunion album, The Past, the Present, the Future, arrived in 2015. It was the group's first album in 20 years, and although it carried the weight of long-awaited nostalgia, it never came close to the commercial heights of the original 3 records. Critics noted what fans had already heard at the Soul Train performance. The voices were not what they had been in 1991. JoJo launched his own label, JT Entertainment, with his wife Tashonda in 2020 and released a solo single called Special on Valentine's Day that year. He spoke openly about how the addiction battles had strained his relationship with K-Ci. K-Ci released his own solo single, Jesus Saves, the same year, returning briefly to the gospel where the brothers had started, and explaining in interviews that he had wanted to release a testimony before another ballad. During the pandemic, the Haley brothers and the DeGreat brothers reached out to each other and slowly began rebuilding what had broken in 1996. Their conversations turned into an official Jodeci reunion in 2022, with the group signing new management and appearing on New Edition's Culture Tour that summer. That same year, Jodeci performed Come and Talk to Me at Diddy's Lifetime Achievement Musical Tribute, sharing the stage with Lil' Kim, The Lox, and Busta Rhymes. K-Ci secured his first solo #1 on the adult R&B chart for his contribution to Charlie Wilson's No Stopping Us, alongside Babyface and Johnny Gill. The wins were smaller than what they had been in 1998. They were also the wins of 2 men who had not been expected to live long enough to score them. What had happened to K-Ci and JoJo was not one event.